Well, thank you, Mr. Spahi. I think I would have recommended the short form, but it's all right. I also especially want to thank Deputy Prime Minister Simsek for being here, and enjoyed meeting him as well. And of course, thanks to the American-Turkish Council and the Turkey-U.S. Business Council for the invitation to come here to address this conference on U.S.-Turkey relations. I also want to give a special call out to my good friend and ATC Chairman, General Jim Jones, who has played a vital role, I might say also in continuing the work that another dear friend, Brent Scowcroft, has championed, and they have both focused on building and strengthening relationships between Turkish and American business leaders who provide continuity and a core of support for U.S.-Turkish cooperation to advance shared interests in democracy, stability, and prosperity. So again, Jim, thank you for your leadership in this realm. And certainly the membership of these two organizations has been and remain a resource that is even more important in times as challenging as the ones that we are living through in the United States, in Turkey, and in our various relationships. Now, for more than 6 decades, Turkey and the United States have been allied in NATO, and the security relationship is certainly as critical today as ever. But today, I will focus my remarks in the energy domain, also recalling, of course, that climate change that I will touch on in the clean energy context is itself an important national security issue. In fact, some have argued that part of the origin of the issues in Syria have come from climate stress. But let me start with comments on 3 significant changes in the global energy picture, really just in the last decade, years, and even months. So first, energy security. The 2014 Russian incursion in Ukraine certainly accelerated our thinking collectively about energy security in the 21st century. This might just be catching up to Jim Jones, who emphasized energy security when he was with NATO over a decade ago. The Ukraine situation certainly highlighted what most would call an overdependence on Russian natural gas throughout Europe, from the Baltics to the Mediterranean. And this led to a focus on increased Caspian gas supply to Europe through the Southern Corridor. And now we also see the possibility of significant Eastern Mediterranean natural gas. And of course, for all of this, Turkey is obviously pivotal to how these initiatives go forward. But in addition to west-east, as the Southern Corridor would run principally, again, Jim Jones was instrumental in 2014, in fact, at the Atlantic Council meeting in Istanbul, which I was also pleased to be part of, putting forward additionally a north-south corridor proposal for energy, telecom, transport, and this is now, I think, known as the 3 Seas Initiative, Baltic to Adriatic and Black Sea. So once again, now we have Turkey at a critical intersection point, both east-west and north-south. So Turkey is obviously a key player in this development of infrastructure aligned with energy security, but so, I would argue, is the U.S.-Turkey relationship as a key enabler for moving forward in these dimensions. But the energy security discussion that was stimulated, particularly in 2014, is much broader than just about energy supply and routes. In fact, in May of 2014, the G7 energy ministers met and developed a list of 7 principles for energy security in the 21st century. I won't go through them all, but I'll just emphasize 2. One is the development of markets, functioning markets, as an important part of energy security. And second is the role of clean energy, which is carbon-free, if you like, in terms of energy security. So let me comment on those. So second, after energy security, let me say a couple of things about energy markets. For one thing, the U.S. energy scene has developed so rapidly, it has influence on global markets. First, if I look at oil, in 2008, the United States was an importer of over 11 million barrels a day of crude oil and petroleum products. That 11 plus million barrels per day is now down to just about 5 million barrels per day in 2016. This is an enormous swing, obviously more than 6 million barrels a day. Nice impact on our balance of payments, $300 billion a year at current oil prices. But that production, adding those 6 million barrels a day, well, it's actually adding about 4 million barrels a day of production, has really impacted global oil prices, and that is good for all consumer countries, including of course, Turkey. Now, whether this is a new norm, we will not quite ready yet to predict that, but certainly it's a very different set of fundamentals in what remains an oil market subject to the occasional surprise, shall we say. Now, if I turn to natural gas, which we've already touched upon in Europe, once again, the United States is producing tremendously increased amount of natural gas. That has influenced global markets in 2 ways. One is we are not importers of LNG, and that was anticipated that we would be a major importer. Those cargoes have now been freed up, and they were freed up to go to Europe and to go to Asia. But secondly, now, since March, we are exporters of LNG. Australia is coming on, etc. Bottom line is, we have seen in a remarkably short time the development of much more liquid global gas trade, a lot of spot market contracts going forward. This has major implications. It certainly, going back to the earlier discussion, suggests the need for more trading hubs. Turkey, of course, has had a long-standing interest in developing this. There will be work to do in terms of some of the issues around transparency and contract structures, not to mention physical infrastructure. But this is a time of change. It's a time for integrated planning around all of Europe, tied to what is increasingly a global natural gas market. It's not only about fossil fuels, however. If we turn to renewables, clean energy, we again have seen a remarkable development, I will say, during the Obama administration, for example. So since 2008, the cost of onshore wind in the United States has decreased by 41%. The cost of solar, photovoltaic solar, has decreased by 54% for rooftops and by 64% for utility scale. We now have 50 projects larger than 100 megawatts each for photovoltaics. The cost of batteries for electric vehicles has fallen by 74%. The cost of LED lighting has fallen 94%. Actually, as an aside, we just saw an advertisement from Home Depot that you can buy an 8-pack of LEDs for $1.62 each. This is incredible, absolutely incredible. And all of these price reductions are reflected in deployment increases that are dramatic in the United States and in other countries. And so this is another area where I'll come back to a discussion in terms of Turkey's objectives and U.S.-Turkey connections. But let me also add that this has been an incredible jobs driver. In the United States, low-carbon electricity is now over 600,000 jobs. Over 200,000 of those jobs are in the solar sector. And if you look at energy efficiency, and I will concede, it is very difficult to define what an energy efficiency job is. But we have tried. We're going to be sharing our methodology with other countries, and we estimate 1.9 million jobs in energy efficiency, a large number of those being various forms of construction jobs. So these are revolutionary changes across the board: oil, gas, renewables, et cetera. And in fact, then let me go, in fact, my third major thematic thrust, again, starting with energy security and the global shift of energy markets, is in fact to return to the subject of clean energy and climate. This has been, I think, colloquially speaking, a hell of a year for climate change. Obviously, last December in Paris, the Paris Accord, going into effect incredibly this Friday. I mean, nobody seriously dreamed that we would be going, A, maybe getting the agreement, and B, getting it coming into force in such a short time. But beyond that, I want to emphasize two other events. Just a few weeks ago in Rwanda, again, the nations of the world came together to amend the Montreal Protocol to address the challenges of cooling. I won't go into detail, but the projections were that unaddressed, the increase in cooling required in many hot climates around the world would itself contribute 0.5 degree centigrade of global warming in this century. That is now on the track to being resolved. Another big climate step. And finally, the other one that I'll mention, which is very dear to my heart in particular, is that on the first day of the Paris meeting last year, now with almost a year past, the focus is on the Paris Agreement of the last day of the Paris meeting. But on the first day of the Paris meeting, 20 countries, including the United States, committed to doubling energy technology R&D over 5 years. It's called Mission Innovation. It's also a commitment to couple these better to private investment. Basically, innovation was put at the heart of climate solutions. And this, we believe, is a global enterprise that we should all be participating in. And again, I believe that we will find a lot of innovation opportunities if the U.S. and Turkey can come together and focus on elevating our collaboration in these areas. So, in fact, let me just say a few words about some specific U.S.-Turkey collaborations of relevance to this. And this will take place in the context of these global developments that I've just described. First of all, of course, roughly 70% of Turkey's greenhouse gas emissions come from the energy sector. It's not surprising. Same in the United States, basically, and most places. But obviously, therefore, how the energy sector is grown in Turkey will be part and parcel of addressing the international climate goals. Now, Turkey has put forward goals for 2030, 21% reduction in greenhouse gases, 10 gigawatts of wind, 16 gigawatts of solar, increased hydroelectric, commissioning of a nuclear plant, and reducing transmission and distribution losses by 15%. These are all areas where, again, we are also focused on all of those directions, and that will only set the stage for, again, possible strong collaboration. In 2014, at the Istanbul Atlantic Council meeting that I already referred to, former Energy and Natural Resources Minister Yildiz and I signed an MOU on wind energy to strengthen our commercial ties, and that's now, the products of that are now being seen. GE, for example, will supply 22 wind turbines for the 50 megawatt T-Ray wind farm in Izmir, along with a maintenance agreement. They will also supply turbines to add 70 megawatts to the Bergamo wind power plant. Similarly, in solar, we have commercial ties. First Solar is working with two Turkish companies, and I will not be able to pronounce them properly, Basariyaji Energy and Zorlu Energy, that we've heard about, again on projects totaling 160 megawatts of photovoltaic power. The U.S. Trade and Development Agency, USTDA, which has an MOU with the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources in Turkey, has supported 18 clean energy partnership projects over the past 6 years, including the first geothermal plant in Turkey and pilot projects for smart grid development, an area where we are certainly placing a lot of emphasis and have a lot of experience now being built up. Nuclear power is another area obviously of interest to Turkey. I personally have reinforced the President's message that nuclear power must be on the table as part of the portfolio of solutions for a low carbon future. And that's another area where we are certainly open to experience in terms of sharing our approach to safety standards, for example, through the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and security issues, safeguarding against all threats, including those from seismic risks, which we are dramatically increasing our research on over the last year, but also the threats that come from, let's say, intentional attacks, which are an increasing threat vector in Turkey, but frankly also in the United States, where we have had attacks on some of our electricity substations. So a lot to work together on in all of these technologies for addressing a clean energy future. So in concluding, I just want to just reemphasize that meeting the growing demand for energy and the demand for clean energy in Turkey is something where we have very, very strong alignment and are prepared to emphasize that collaboration. What I do want to emphasize in closing is that we made a very big step collectively in Paris in choosing ambitious targets, generally in the 20% to 30% range in the 2025 to 2030 timeframe. And that puts us on a track for the kind of deep decarbonization that we believe is essential when you get to mid-century and beyond. But being on the track isn't the same thing as following it. We will need increasing ambition year after year, decade after decade, beyond those Paris commitments of, say, 2030. And we've spent a lot of time today, I spent time today, discussing the tremendous progress we have seen in low-carbon electricity technologies. And that's extremely important, especially since we will see more and more electrification of the economy writ broadly. But that deep decarbonization will also require enormous progress in the transportation sector. That will be more challenging. It will also require great progress in the industrial sector. That'll be even more challenging. And we are probably going to have to add to this work on what I call large-scale carbon management in order to have all of this come together for a global solution built upon our national and binational efforts to develop and deploy at an affordable cost these low-carbon technologies across the entire economy. So that's kind of the picture that I see, and again, we certainly look to build on what has been a strong U.S.-Turkey relationship at the governmental level, strong relationship at the business level, and as I said earlier, we count on the business connections in particular to carry us across all of the ups and downs that we might see in a variety of areas. So thank you very much for what you're doing in terms of strengthening our U.S.-Turkey partnership. Thank you.